I think I, it's very difficult to speak about Detroit and the University of Michigan without intertwining them, because I think they've both been a part of my life ever since I was born. I was born in the city to a U of M alumna. My mother had attended University of Michigan and graduated in '56 when she received her library science degree. And because we always heard about U of M in the house, it was something that was kind of familiar, but just something that was off in the distance. Growing up, I was really, really so blessed to have an incredible childhood. I went and attended 12 years of parochial school. So after attending, 12 years of really intense private school education, I was finding myself wondering, what was next. I had grown up in a neighborhood that was surrounded by Motown artists. So, for example, one of our den mothers, as when I was a Girl Scout, was the wife of Holland Dozier Holland, Mr. Dozier, his wife, and she taught us to make jam. And it was a wonderful experience growing up because, having the Four Tops in your classroom coming to talk, and PTA meetings, or living around the corner from Marvin Gaye, and these incredible, artists that we kind of looked at as just adults who were in our neighborhood. Now in retrospect, I was like, oh my goodness, it was just a phenomenal place to live and grow up. Gladys and I would come to our grade school football games because her son played on the team, and it was just a really wonderful, almost idyllic type of situation, despite the fact that I do remember my father kind of ushering us out of the city during the riots, which we now call the rebellion. And we went over to Canada, where my grandmother had a home, and we still have property in Canada. But I think that too was a part of the experience of being a Detroiter. We were so close to Canada that it again was something that we kind of took for granted. And now as I'm older, the whole idea of the space of Detroit and how incredible it is really strikes me. I've never been anywhere else in the nation or in the world where there's anything quite like Belle Isle. We used to spend almost every Saturday, we'd done well with school, we'd go for a ride around Belle Isle, and there was a good humor truck, and there were just all these happy memories of spending time in the city without any cares or concerns, despite the fact that, when people speak about Detroit, I think they really don't know about that really strong pattern of folks who had migrated from the South coming to live here, as my grandparents did, and how they really, truly appreciated and relished the opportunity to find jobs and employment in the city, and how the city was really thriving in a way that was almost like a renaissance of art. For me, as a thinking back on it, with Motown and all the different activities that were going on, it was something that I really, now in retrospect, I really honor, because I feel as though that helped to set that foundation that made my next transition. As I said, when I was trying to decide about where to go to school, I had different options. My high school, one of the counselors, she had suggested to me, well, Beth, you seem to be leaning toward the arts. You really are appreciating and enjoying the arts classes so much. You sing, you doing, I wasn't a very good artist, but I did take art classes, and I really found myself gravitating toward that. And so she said, have you ever thought about being a history of art major? And I was like, history of art? What? I didn't really know what that encompassed. So she said, well, I have to tell you, the Detroit Institute of Arts is offering a full scholarship if for someone who's interested in going into the history of art, and I know that you've said you were looking for scholarships to supplement, your family, trying to get the money together for you to go to school. And this was before I had applied to any school. And she said, why don't you go down and see about the application process? And back then, before the internet, I had to call, find out, get the application, filled it out, and lo and behold, I was called in for an interview. And I got into the space, and the DIA was very familiar to me because where I was born was on Hancock, right around the corner. So when I was little, my grandmother would take me over there all the time. And there was even an exhibit of Tutankhamun's treasures that were back when I was a very little girl, and she took me to it, and the guards used to laughingly call me King Tut's wife because I jumped across the velvet rope and hugged the sarcophagus, which of course you couldn't do now. And they would laugh because every week I was coming to visit King Tut and talk to him, and they were like, okay, this is a special kid. But my grandmother always encouraged me to, be exploring. Of course, I couldn't go past the rope anymore. After that first time, grandmothers do not go for that type of behavior. So I learned my lesson. But, I always had a very soft spot for the DIA. I had always felt it was a very special place. So in the interview, I talked about that, talked about, what Detroit meant to me, how much I loved the city, and how much I wanted to find ways to give back because I had always been involved in high school in different extracurricular activities that were dealing with that type of, I don't even want to say philanthropy, but my grandmother was a very strong activist. I had grown up marching with Grace Lee Boggs and, just being a part of, people who were looking for a better way for all of the citizens of Detroit to live, even back then. So, being a part of, and I'm going back in time to around that same era when I had given King Tut the hug, I also had the opportunity to march in the great Walk on Freedom that Mrs. Boggs coordinated with her husband Jimmy Lee. Mr. Boggs was an amazing man, and Dr. King was there, and it was where he gave his rehearsal speech for the I Have a Dream speech that he later did in August in Washington, but he did do the initial version of it in Detroit at Cobo. So it was just all these amazing experiences, and as I described that to the curators, they were like, wow, okay, I see that you have a deep love of the city, you have a deep love of art, we think you'd be a good candidate. And so I was awarded a full scholarship with internship in the summer to work at the Detroit Institute of Arts. So that left me thinking, okay, where do I go to get a degree in this? Because I've got a scholarship, but that doesn't mean I know where I want to go. And so I started looking around. The University of Toronto offered one, that type of major. University of Chicago, we visited those campuses. We also had a recruiter actually come from Bryn Mawr that one of the curators had suggested because they said, you've had the private school experience, we think private school might be a good fit for you too. In the back of my mind, though, I kept thinking about how I didn't want to stray too far from the city or my family, or just, I have to tell you, that whole sense of the mitten is really, really precious to me. And so I thought, let me check and see. And sure enough, U of M did have a history of art major. And so I thought, oh, okay. I applied to all the schools, got into all the schools, and when it came time to make my decision, I thought, well, you know what? It just really makes sense because the professors at U of M will be familiar with the DIA's collection, so that as I'm working on different projects at the DIA, I'll also be able to call upon my professors and, utilize their knowledge in terms of doing the best that I could for the DIA. And so, lo and behold, I chose U of M, which made my mom really, really happy. She had tried not to, be biased about where I was going to go. She had been really sweet and carried meet all these other locations to see the schools with my family. But after I announced I wanted to go to U of M, after having been told, this was the sidebar, I had also applied because I also really love making people laugh and making them happy. I had applied to Clown College as well and got into Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, Clown College. So when that acceptance letter came, we had a family meeting, and my father was like, you could go to U of M or you can go to Clown College. He was like, there is no decision to be made here. And I was like, but you know, I love making people happy. He goes, Beth, you can make people happy anywhere. Just go get a real education. So I totally agreed. I knew it was just a dream, and I still fancy what would my life have been if I had been a clown on the road with Ringling Brothers. But nevertheless, I started and went to U of M, and that fall, you know, having come from a very, very small school that was on Marygrove College's campus and graduating with a class of 76 girls, to go to U of M was mind-blowing, to say the least. It was something I had no idea. Even going to orientation in the summer it's quieter compared to the cacophony that you get when you arrive at the start of September at that huge university. They put me in one of the biggest dorms, West Quad, right in the smack dab next to the Union, in the heart of Central Campus. And thankfully, I had two other friends from my high school who had also applied. And strangely enough, we all got placed in the same room together. So that was, I think, a really good thing, because even though we were heading off in a new space, it was something where it was like, oh my goodness, you know, we've got each other to kind of talk through all this madness that's going on around us. And then you become immersed. The classes, you know, being a freshie there, I always really try to take care now as an employee and a staff person working in one of the departments to really watch out for the freshies, because that initial semester is something that really could make you or break you. And the classes are challenging. I wasn't academically challenged. I think I was socially challenged by the fact that I was encountering people that I had never dreamed of encountering, and finding myself really intrigued. Again, that curious soul that I've always had really became so just illuminated by all these different faces, people. Even the people in the dorm just fascinated me. So I would be the one who's bouncing from table to table, you know, during our meals, just trying to find out about different people and what they were there for, why were they there, what were their majors. I was the only history of art major of all my friends, of everybody I knew who was in the dorm. So it was kind of like I was the outlier in a way that I kind of enjoyed, because when I went to the classes, I was able to really kind of immerse myself in other times, other eras. I loved history when I was in school always, and so finding out about the artistic expression of art was something that really appealed to me. So, you know, I found myself meeting with professors, and the cognate classes that you could take. I didn't do as well, even though I'd done extraordinarily well in high school. I was, you know, Phi Beta Kappa and all the things you want to be. But, you know, it was just like, oh my gosh, when I got there, and the science classes, they were a little more challenging than I had foreseen them to be. But I struggled through. I took a psych class where they passed around a brain, you know, all these things that I had never dreamed would happen to me. To just, you have to realize that you're not the first, and that you stand, many stand behind you, and that all the hard work, and it is hard work. I don't mean to wax poetic about, oh, every night I was just happily sitting around eating peanuts and watching TV. I was really hitting the books, and the slide examinations that we had for history of art were quite strenuous. You know, you had to know the provenance, which meant not only the name of the artist, but the title of the work, where it came from, and the year. So studying was very much a part of who I was. But I just really feel as though all of that blood, sweat, and tears, because you do a lot of all of that, it's all worth it. And the pride that you feel when you cross that stage, I just look at the students and see this like exuberation that comes over them when they cross, because we have, you know, different ceremonies, and oh my goodness, I just feel that same feeling I had. And in that way, I feel that that Michigan experience keeps you young, and being tied into the Alumni Association and being able to kind of see how things change but stay the same. It's the same way with Detroit. So I'd say, you know, just really, really stay grounded, you know, feet on the ground, but eyes to the sky, because you can really dream big and do great things. And that degree really does carry a lot of weight, much more than I ever anticipated when I decided to choose U of M versus Clown College. It's a whole other, I know my life has gone on a trajectory that is, I'm sure of course made my family very happy, but you know, I think it made the ancestors proud too, because my grandfather had worked as a janitor at the library in order for my mom to go to library school, so that then when she went to graduate school at U of M, after attending an HBCU in New Orleans, Xavier, you know, for her to be able to come and attain that degree made him incredibly proud. And, you know, I just think about how many ancestors, you know, just are, you know, just smiling at us and thinking, wow, they're doing some great things. So I have to say, go blue.
Yeah.